I think it's finally time I do a video of my Anycubic Kobra Max. Oh, it needs to cool down a bit. So this 3D printer, it's so big, we really don't have room for it. It lived out in the living room for the longest time. And now the 3D printing closet has become the 3D printing closet. And I think it's time we take it out, clean up the closet of all the little bits of plastic. And it's finally time for me to talk about this 3D printer, because this has actually been like an appliance. I've been able to make my own little arsenal of 3D files that replace me having to go to the hardware store to get things. And so whenever I'm making a pipe strap or a bracket or whatever, I can come back home, because usually I'm within walking distance, and I'll be helping someone to restore a building or build something, and I can just set this to print real quick, go back out to work, come back, and usually Theis can give me just the handful of stuff, brackets and whatnot, through the window when I run back. And this thing has not ever failed to print. The auto leveling feature is really great too. I think I've done about maybe about 9 spools of plastic on this so far. I try to economize pretty well, but then I also try to make sure I spend time to make stuff that's pretty useful, like this. Let's see, does it work? Oh no, it doesn't work. Oh, that fits perfectly. Because I'm always tired of having to hold a 2-liter bottle when I come from the supermarket. Wow.
Hey, this is pretty great.
That is, okay. I've gotten pretty good at 3D printing to where I can get it on the first try. It's under 130C. That's good. Wow, okay, I'm really happy with that. So the closet is now empty. We've vacuumed it, and this will be going back in shortly. But since this has been 6 months of me owning this, of us owning this, and putting it through some pretty heavy use, we thought it'd be good to take a look at it. And honestly, it looks like it's perfectly fine. The head has almost no plastic goop on it. I'll just pull some off, but otherwise I'm just gonna let it go back into service. And my camera woman is wanting the 3D printed camera housing back because she's having a hard time holding the phone. Here you go.
Oh, thank you. I probably should have turned it off first. But
Oh well.
like a glove.
Yep. This 3D printer is really accurate. Like really, really accurate. Okay, we'll go back to this. So I've printed, maybe like 400, 500 things on this so far. And now, apparently, I just realized they stopped making these. They make a second version, which is mostly the same parts, it seems, but it's a little bit bigger. I'm gonna be honest, I was a little bit fed up with the Makerspace's 3D printers whenever I got this, and so I just wanted to get the biggest one on the market. But now that they have an even bigger one, I already have enough of a hard time fitting this in my closet, and these are used on eBay for like $300. So I still recommend this because I've had no issues with this. I really had no print failures, except for whenever I started up from the cold, sometimes the first little line won't go down right. So sometimes I'll start a print and then I'll stop it, take the little bit off, and let it start again. And the heat needs to warm up more in the hot end. So that's common across a lot of 3D printers. And the prints may have worked, but I just tend to, whenever I see it going a little bit funky on the first layer, I tend to just throw that away. And I've ended up with almost no waste from this 3D printer. I've printed a lot of things that are practical. A lot of the things here would fill buckets, but whenever people show off 3D printers, they tend to have buckets full of things they printed. But that kind of is a detraction in my mind because, well, those 3D printed things aren't really be out in the world finding a use. Meanwhile, I cannot show the stuff in this because if you want to see them, I have pictures of them up on my Thingiverse and Printables page because they're all in buildings holding pipes together and holding wiring in the middle of walls and stuff. So that's a testament to how useful this is, that I have been able to save my clients like $500 and not having to buy stuff from Lowe's or Home Depot. And Instead, I just charged them the cost of the filament plus double the cost, because I figured that'll cover the wear and tear and the electricity. And it just about comes out to it. To where overall, in the past 6 months, even though you can get these for $300 now, I've made like about $200 just from printing stuff for my job instead of buying this stuff. And that even covers the plastic and such. I try not to print too much because you don't want to fall into the trap of overusing a tool, but when I do use this tool, I'm just very pleased. I have one thing that I did with this printer. I printed a garden hose fitting, and it hasn't broken. One little trick is you just print really thick lines and really hot and have a lot of infill, and I still have a garden hose fitting. I mean, well, none of my garden hose fittings have cracked, but there's one fitting that is especially overused on my pressure washer, and it's basically like an injection molded part. I've 3D printed this Super Nintendo shell for a viewer who asked me to print it, and this one was a monster with supports. Thankfully, this one didn't need really any supports at all, but the underside of this one definitely did need supports. Now that I'm making this video, I can send that back, or I can send that over to him, and he can put that motherboard that he found from the Super Nintendo into that shell. Now, the one thing that I have noticed that slowly happens over time is that this glass plate just moves over. I've also haven't had any issues with stuff sticking to the glass plate. So, a lot of people, they can chip their glass if they try to pull it up with a knife. Back in 2015 or so, whenever we just had solid plates, I would do that. But with this already has such a hard time sticking to stuff. And yet, whenever it's hot, the plastic never seems to come off of it. But as soon as it cools down, the expansion ratio is perfect for it. And a few prints, like this big one, you can imagine, this is a pretty big print, very likely to get stuck. All I had to do was just go into the preheat settings and tell it to heat up again, and that thermal cycle popped it right off. So this is actually a tool. I've had a lot of 3D printers. I've had a Stratasys Dimension Elite. That was, I've had a FlashForge Creator Pro. I've had 4 of those actually. I've had Tina 2 3D printers that they're little gimmicks. They're nostalgic for how 3D printers used to be. And all of them, you end up wasting maybe at best 10% of your plastic on failed prints. But with this, I would say my wastage is down to under 1%. I've actually been having a really, really good success rate with this. I should have started marking down how many things I printed with this, but I know I would forget. In case I forgot to mention, and I think I did, I spent $508 on this after tax. I think I got it down to $480. At the time, they were wanting something akin to $500, but they were doing a sale on eBay. And now here's the thing. Anycubic, they're just one of those companies that sells stuff by any means necessary. So they have that best or best offer option. And you got to use it, because I sent an offer. They had like $75 off, and I sent an offer that was, maybe it was $50 off, and I sent an offer that was even $50 below that, and they took it. So that's also one reason why I'm not surprised that this has been discontinued, and they have a newer, bigger one, because I could kind of tell, I was a little surprised that they took my offer on that. And this one, if I remember right, it was assembled late last year, and I've had no issues with reading formats or anything. For a while, I had a hard time getting it to play the tunes, because I like to have it play a song, and with this one, I've decided to have the Legend of Zelda Treasure Chest Unlock theme. And for a while, it wouldn't read that, but now, for some reason, it's reading it fine. So, I don't know, there might be some little kinks to work out with making Gcode for it, but it seems like it's working fine now. I didn't actually do any tinkering. I just I put the Gcode in the preset in Cura, and it didn't work for a while, and then it started working all of a sudden. So it's like, okay, well, whatever. And I really like the runout sensor. I've never ran out yet. I've actually not had any issues. A lot of this, I haven't had really any issues. Now, it might also help that we have it in a very pristine closet to where there's almost no dust on it. I haven't even dusted this for half a year, and there's barely any dust on it. And so that bodes well. Like, it keeps things from grinding with dust inside of it. The 3D printers at the makerspace, they have dust all over them, and it really messes with the mechanisms. But with this, all you have to really deal with is the dust from putting coats in and out. The frame seems nice and sturdy. 3D printers have come a long way. I'm actually really pleased. Cable management, well, that's one of those things where it's always up to your choice. And sometimes if I'm doing a really tall print, I'll come over here and I'll pull these cables up. But again, I've had no real issues. The only thing that I've noticed is just that this plate will inch over sometimes. I imagine sometimes whenever it drags the print nozzle across the plastic, it'll sometimes be very vigorous. I haven't had any big print failures, so I'm not really sure. There's no big events that have caused that. It's just little things here and there that it moves it over. But thankfully these aren't little clips, so it works pretty well. The geometry of this seems to be a lot more accurate than pretty much any other 3D printer I've run into. If you want things to fit into one another, you can just make them like 5% smaller. Well, there's actually like a different thing with that, where it's like, not 5%, sorry, 0.5%. And there is like a fatness of the walls that squeeze out. But then it's also like if you had a big 3D printer printing something this big to fit in a hole that big, you would probably you wouldn't make it 0.5% smaller. But I'm still not quite sure on how to get the exact math. I kind of go from my gut feeling. Usually I expect the walls to take like at least 1/3 of a millimeter of it kind of to squeeze out a little bit. This thing, I have not tried it with ABS yet. I probably shouldn't try it with ABS because it's a big open bed slinger. Not that it being a bed slinger is really a bad thing, but the fact that it's open and just so big really makes it more difficult to enclose. But I can see about trying ABS, and I'll crank up the bed temperature. I really like how you get a lot of control on this. I've actually not wanted any more settings. People, they put, what is it, like Clipper and all this stuff on there. I can't remember for sure what it's called, but they put all that stuff onto a system like this to get more control. But honestly, I haven't wanted any more control from a tool. Kind of like, I don't really want to see the voltage measurement on a Milwaukee battery. I just want to see that it has 4 lights lit up or 3 lights or whatever it is. I don't necessarily need to know that it's 97% charged. I just want to know that it's mostly charged. And for something like this, that's just meant to turn filament into product, it does that really well. And the accuracy, I'm really happy with the accuracy. I would even say that whenever you take the layer lines down a whole lot, it actually, like this is 0.3 of a millimeter. I print these quite thick. Firstly, it looks kind of nostalgic. I'm kind of nostalgic for that early era of 3D printing. And also, it also makes sure that there's less layer boundaries, less layer connections, and it's more likely that this will hold a heavier weight. It's kind of funny. I didn't really know what else to say, so I sat here and brushed it off for like 3 minutes, and it's really almost no dirt, just a little bit of, you can see 2 lines there, but that's about it. And now granted, you keep this apartment very clean, and we do keep this clean like a clean room. Like we actually have a silicon wafer over there, a microchip wafer that it is so clean in here that it doesn't really have any dust on it, even though it's a microchip wafer that's just sitting out. But so granted, like that's kind of to be expected with our place, but I feel like I'm really happy that I got this tool. You know, it would be easy for me to think like, oh, I should have waited and got something else. But I somehow got something that perfectly fits our needs. The newer one, the Anycubic Kobra Max, I think, whatever it's called, it is a little bit bigger, just by a bit, but I feel like this, I've already had a hard time dealing with fitting this into places. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even fit on the table. It's hanging off the back.
It barely fits in the closet, too.
It barely fits in the closet.
You can shut the door when you put it all the way back.
You can.
But barely.
But you can't run it in the closet because of Cura, it puts the table all the way back, which goes way beyond. So we have to pull it out. You know what I will say? Another thing that I tend to do, and one reason why it might just be a perfectly working 3D printer, you know, there's a lot of things where maybe people fail the 3D prints because they make them wrong, and I happen to be way past that early phase of making 3D prints wrong, because I can usually just barf something out in 45 minutes, and it works.
You did, though.
Yeah, I did. Like I just doodle it out, and it works. That's how I am with 3D printing. And well, one thing that I do is I never print it in the same place. You may have noticed that from any videos where I 3D print something, I always move it around. Because a lot of people, they wear out the center of their build plate. And when you have a build plate this big, you basically have 16 build plates. Because a lot of stuff will fit in only just like a small area. Especially when I'm printing washers. I'll print washers near the perimeter. Because I don't want to wear out the middle of the 3D print bed. And also, I've noticed so many people that have just basically a hole in the. You know what? The magnets on the fridge. See, these were from the Makerspace, and I actually had to cut them up because the stuff just kept getting printed in the middle. You can see where it kept making the test extrusions and such. I kept these from the trash, but it's also a good element to learn from. Oh, I just realized. I forgot. I'm also using this 3D printer, and I'm going to hopefully start using TPU, which is kind of rubbery, to make face gaskets for my Vive XR Elite 3D headset, VR headset. And so hopefully I can start using these custom face gaskets, which this is actually custom. Oh wait, this is actually custom fit to my face, but my 3D scanning, just an iPhone app, my 3D scanning, it kind of widened my face a little bit, and I also need to make these wider as well. But it's definitely a proof of concept. Oh, I just realized another thing I 3D printed. I totally forgot about this as well. So I wanted to make these sconces for the workshop. They have a bit of a style to them. And I had this piping that I cut into little quarters. And I wanted to see about doing something with some stained glass. I thought that'd be kind of cool. I happen to have all this early 1900s stained glass, especially this stuff. This is 1930s, I believe. And I hit upon making this 3D printed housing. I don't really know what I'm going to hook to the bottom of that, but I can always glue more to it. But either way, I have a quick little prototype to use some scraps. And that's what 3D printing has unlocked for me.
There's one more thing.
There is?
Over the stove.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, there's a bunch of stuff. All right, I forgot. I'll need to add the wiring to this, but this is a lamp for over the stove because we didn't want to buy one. And we had this other light. I figured I would just modify it to work. So when I get my other wiring, I'll solder that up. Thank you very much for reminding me of that because I forgot.
I just remembered.
it's difficult. It's like thinking like, how many things have I drilled holes in? It's hard for me to really think about in a reverse way like that, because I just go over to my workbench, and it's like, well, I have a lot of things that I've drilled holes in, but I can't really think of them at the moment. Well, there's no maintenance to do on it, so I guess we just put it back in the closet. Man, this thing is so big. Oh, the vacuum cleaner's there. Oh.
My bad. My bad.
That's fine. This thing is so awkward. I don't know if any of you guys would really want, unless you have a big workshop, would really want the next one, because this is already so big. Ah, my knee.
Ooh, I heard that.
It's gonna get bad when I really get old. Okay, and then prepare, leveling, auto level. Oh, right. You gotta test the Hall effect sensor on there. There we go. Let's have a piece of tool steel here. This is basically what it does with auto leveling. It just goes to each point, and it has a Hall effect sensor or whatever inside of it, and it detects how far it has to go to touch it, and it detects the capacitance or whatever. And yeah, it then takes, ow, my knee again. It just takes that measurement and figures out what the offset is, and so if it's curved or whatever, it knows how to 3D print relative to that. I do this like once a month and a half, something like that, and it always significantly improves the printing, because I believe that maybe the nozzle wears away a little bit. It doesn't look like it's worn away that much, but they do wear, and I've printed quite a bit with it, and things happen. Stuff moves, bolts get loosened, I guess, I don't know. But it just moves by a skosh, and you gotta have it auto sensor, auto level. But it really beats doing it by hand, because by hand you really can't get that level of control. But being able to do it digitally like this is perfect. Oh yeah, I was also going to say, oh, you can get that out. You don't have to wait for me to film.
I'm just kidding.
You're always afraid of being like disrupted to the filming. The face gasket. So one reason why I'm able to not waste as much plastic is this is actually the second version, but the first version, I just tested the dimensions that I wanted, and I printed one layer, and that's all. I didn't waste printing an entire one. I just basically, instead of having this curved one, I just had one layer, and I printed that just to see how it lined up, and it did not line up. So then I figured out how to go with it. And if you can print something as a single layer, you can even just start the print and cut it halfway through, or like getting halfway through the second layer or whatever, and you'll save a significant amount of plastic while getting a good grasp on the actual dimensions, because then you can take this, you can measure it, at least in these two dimensions, and with the rest of it, you can work with it. But with this, you can make sure it's not going to be squished or anything by your 3D printer. So that's one trick that I've used whenever I really felt a bit lost, and especially with this headset, because there's a lot of different dimensions that I have to get right. And this even ended up being a bit wrong. So I'll do another one of these, and then the fourth version of this, I'll print with the TPU, and it'll be a lot better. And just like that, it's done. Not bad. This menu is pretty good. You got various settings. You can go print, all this stuff. These are my files, which these will all be on Thingiverse, and printables, and Colts 3D and whatnot. Links are in the description. You know, I guess I just came into contact with one of the first issues I've ever really noticed. I told it to do the auto leveling, and it keeps the temperature up afterwards, expecting it to be printing. And every single time I've done the auto level, I've always had to print something eventually. So I just immediately go towards printing. But I guess there's no real way to get the temperature down. And you don't really want to turn the heater, you don't want to turn the 3D printer off whenever it's up to 190°C. So instead I went into the preheat settings and just set it to 40 and 40. And so once that gets down below like 130, 120°C, I'll turn it off. But I guess if I wanted to nitpick, that could be something that's lacking. But to be honest, it's pretty good. I'm going to be honest. We live in a world of bad programming, bad systems, things that crash. You go to pay for something and the screen freezes and whatnot. With this, I'm fine with it. It works. It doesn't need to connect to the internet. I haven't really found any real issues with it. So again, that complaint, I'm not even going to counter as a real complaint because it's just a different. You just have to go with a different way of doing it. Other than that, yeah, I think it's perfectly fine. There's really no issues with it, and I'm really surprised that I spent $500 on a product, and it works as expected and as intended, and I don't have anything really bad to say about it after 6 months. Why didn't I get them to send me one for free? Holy fuck.